A következő előadót szeretném felkonferálni.
And based on that, I would like to introduce to you the next speaker, Szabolcs Nagy, who is the professor of the Széchenyi University and the deputy head of director of the Veszprém County Archives.
Szeretettel köszöntök mindenkit. Arra kaptam felkérést, hogy a mai nap folyamán Hősök voltak, Kratochvil és a Székelyhadosztály címmel tartsak itt önöknek előadást.
I was asked to deliver a presentation on Károly Kratochvil and the Szekler Division. The question I would like to ask is whether they were heroes or not. This is indeed a very relevant question.
Gyakorlatilag a Székelyhadosztály megítélése
Practically,
időről időre
when we speak about the Szekler Division, we can see that the judgment differs with time. Sometimes positive opinions are formed, sometimes more negative. So, but before dealing with this question of assessment, let's see the historical events. We can see that there were very many military historiographical books, especially during the socialist era, when they said that the Szekler Division betrayed Hungary and they had an absolutely negative role. The Kratochvil and the company, the society that preserved their memory, perhaps had a role in this negative opinion. Also during the Horthy era, their assessment, their judgment was also rather negative. They put down their arms and they were considered as traitors. But some of the figures, some of the soldiers made a very good military career later, especially during the Second World War. So during the Horthy era, very many asked whether the Szekler Division surrendered, was it necessary, and there were also other political reasons why this judgment of the division was not absolutely positive. Kratochvil tried to do something against this bad opinion and try to put some focus or concentrate on their role against the Soviet Republic of Hungary in 1919. And this was the reason why in the socialist era, during the Kádár era, they could use his text and prove that the Szekler Division betrayed the country. But even today, the opinions are very diverse. For example, I was at a conference, and after the end of the conference, I was talking with my colleagues. There was a man there, one of my colleagues, who said that he is a specialist of this issue. So he said that I cannot be easily convinced that the Szekler Division surrendering was a positive action, no matter what they did before and after, for example, between the two world wars. No matter what Kratochvil writes, we are on the firm belief that this surrender was a betrayal, and I think my friend said no one can convince me about the opposite. But then we wrote a study. We tried to carry out a deeper research, and perhaps we were able to come up with new facts and thereby somehow defeat the myth of betrayal. It is very interesting that recently I've had a talk with a married couple who, after the political changes in 1990, were very active. They wanted to erect a memorial statue to the Szekler Division. So this old lady told me that she tried to lobby for this memorial statue, and it was a very difficult job for her to do, because very many politicians after the political changes in 1990 were very much against that, because they were on the same opinion as the left-wing politicians, that they were traitors. So first of all, let's see what the Szekler Division was. There are lots of questions about it, lots of problems arise. There are toposes around this question. Was it a self-organized division, or was it a regular military formation? Very many people think that it was an irregular division, something like the one from Tyrol, so it's paramilitary something. Partly it is true, but it is not completely true. And when we look at the whole story, we cannot justify this statement. Professor Gulyás spoke about Béla Winkler. We heard about how the military forces lost their former power. And indeed it is true that the Szekler units, when returning from the war, and here we should not forget about the different units consisting of many nationalities, but even if they had been able to select all the Hungarian people from the different divisions, from the different units, and organize them into a purely Hungarian military unit, it would have been an enormous, a huge result. But unfortunately, this did not happen. Regular soldiers were dismissed, only the officers remained, and instead of the regular soldiers, they wanted to recruit very young people who were simply not capable to serve as soldiers. Either in Kolozsvár or in Nagyvárad, today Cluj-Napoca or Oradea, these young soldiers living in the ferment of revolutionary idea did more wrong than good. Nevertheless, the Romanians were already inside the borders of Hungary, and something had to be done. And this is the point when we can speak about self-organization. Szekler military officers who were staying in Kolozsvár, who remembered the Romanian attack in 1905, decided that they should do something against a possible new Romanian occupation. So they decided to do something, and decided to recruit volunteers against the Romanian army. But at the same time, they did not have the structure, a military structure, whereby they could have made these troop of volunteers an efficient military force. This is the reason why they contacted Kratochvil and told him that we will provide you with the volunteers, and we would like to ask you to become the commander of this unit. So I would say that's a two-direction process, as a result of which we have the Szekler Division in the end, which although consisted of volunteers, but still something that was part of the regular Hungarian army. The Szekler Nationality Council also joined this endeavor. Hungarian and Transylvanian soldiers returning from the front were sent to the Szekler Division, and from that time on, the personnel, the number of soldiers quickly increased. I already spoke about the 5th Transylvanian District Military Command and its problem. This name, this title, was a title used only for 1 month at the beginning of 1938. So it was at the beginning, and they received the name Szekler Division after that from the Minister of War, from the Minister of Division, and otherwise they had to rename themselves. They were not division anymore, but they changed the name. But at the same time, everyone, also contemporary people, called them a division, and although their official name was different, still they were also always referred to as the Szekler Division. I'm talking about a military unit fighting under the command of Kratochvil. There were lots of troops which, although belonging to the 5th Transylvanian District, but they did not belong to the 38th Division, so I would say that the common name, the common military name, was different, and still everybody thinks that they also belong to the Szekler Division. For example, here we can see a soldier, a commander whose unit never belonged to the Szekler Division, and still it is generally and usually had that they also fought under the command of the Szekler Division. Now let's see the military strength of the Szekler Division. As we proceed in time and space, we can see that significant changes occurred. I talked about the recruitment already. Originally it was in October. The Romanians' occupation should not be imagined as a total control of huge areas, but rather as an occupation when the Romanian army controlled different routes, different hubs or bigger cities, but for example they did not control small villages. Today we feel sorry for those people who live in very remote villages, but at that time they were in a very fortunate position from the point of view of the recruitment, because the first troops were recruited from the villagers inhabiting these remote areas. And then, as I have already mentioned, later all soldiers of Hungarian or Transylvanian origin returning from the front had the opportunity to join the Szekler Division. And of course the division itself was also carrying out recruiting. All this, nevertheless, by Christmas 1918, when the division was still staying Kolozsvár, was not enough. Around 2,500 people were recruited, and not all of them had arms. The Romanian army was approaching, so a decision had to be made, and Kratochvil decided after a long hesitation that they should leave the town and start a fight with the Romanian army outside the town in a rural area. Many people did not like it, and there were also some who left the division. But in the end, it turned out that Kratochvil was right. When they reached the mountains and mountain valleys already with more people, then it turned out, and as it was proved by history, they were successful in stopping and blocking the further movement of the Romanian army. Perhaps their number was not more than 10,000, and those who had arms and weapons were even these were 10,000 were the people armed soldiers, and in addition to that there were other 2,000 people without weapons. We all know that considering the range of their military action, 200 kilometers, we all know that they were not enough. Nevertheless, the geographical position of the mountains was very lucky. There were huge, these were very huge mountains, there were rivers, the valleys was very narrow, but perhaps they wouldn't have been enough. It should have been a much bigger army attacking them. The Romanian army could not attack them as a whole, because part of the Romanian army was fighting elsewhere. It is equally important when we speak about the surrender. So it's very important to ask about the relationship of the Szekler Division and the revolutionary government. We all know that soldiers usually should not formulate political ideas, but fight and follow the command. Most of the soldiers were regular soldiers who did not want to deal with political issues, but sooner or later they simply had to do that. József Pogány, and his role should be accentuated here. He was a journalist, and he tried to attack the Szekler Division using propaganda means, etc. He was the head of the military council. It was kind of a trade union. We can see that during the Soviet Republic, it was an abnormal thing that instead of a regular army hierarchy, an external council had a certain strength or power to interfere with military affairs. So there was a lack of support, there was a lack of trust, and the situation soon escalated. During the Soviet Republic, the relationship was very bad. There were atrocities. The agitators were often physically attacked by the Szekler Division. So the political atmosphere was very bad. If the members of the Szekler Divisions went into the hinterland, and if you take into consideration that the hinterland of the front they were defending was a hinterland with administrative bodies in left-wing towns, Debrecen, Szatmárnémeti, Nagyvárad, the political leadership was left-wing politicians. So when the Szekler Division, the soldiers entered these towns, they were often attacked due to political reasons. Perhaps it would be too lengthy to explain, but there were certain administrative decisions also in the background. At that time, you shouldn't, soldiers were not allowed to wear their paroles showing their military rank, but the Szekler Division simply did not obey this regulation. They were proud of the fact that military defense got more focused and more important in the foreign policy, but soon this period ended and the situation completely changed, and the Szekler Division somehow found itself between two fires. The surrender, the armistice,
illetve bocsánat, nem a fegyverletétel zajlott le április 16-án, egy
I'm talking about April the 16th, which was the date of a large Romanian attack. When the Szeklers tried to fight back, they realized that they do not get any support from the hinterland. They had to decide whether they were able to keep on fighting between the two parties, so they had to decide which side to take, and then together with their newly found partner would attack the other party. So I would say that it was a naive maneuver. Kratochvil contacted the Romanian military command through French mediation in order to make them stop them. They wanted to achieve that the Romanians cease fire until the Szekler Division marches to Budapest and defeat the revolutionary government. We can say that they were unprepared and they were very naive politically. Of course, the French Entente delegation could not promise this to them, and they, of course, did not stop the Romanian attack. And there was another factor, a very important factor, that also impeded the movement of the Szekler Division. By that time, the trust in the Szekler Division was completely lost. And as a result of which they replaced them with an international Red Division who fled in the first moment of the Romanian attack, as a result of which everything collapsed and the Romanian army could easily access the different towns in the surrounding area. So that was the end of the Szekler Division defending the Carpathian Mountains from the Romanian army. Kratochvil decided to withdraw his forces back to the region of Mátészalka. He tries to concentrate his forces there and tries to somehow get better peace conditions. It is very interesting and very telling that the leaders of the Szekler Division felt that the peace negotiations should be conducted only with the Romanians. They had no trust in the Red government, in the communist government. They didn't want to join them, and they did not believe in their promises. This is the reason why they negotiated with the Romanians, and they also surrendered to them. That's another story, that the Romanians also did not keep their promises. People were taken prisoners of war. They were also subjects of trials. Nevertheless, there were some people who could fight on. And by the way, Kratochvil also in his last speech said that I cannot order you to put down your weapons, but those who would like to fight on can do so. We can see similar decision of Thor Marcel during the Second World War, who was a witness to Kratochvil's action. So the remaining soldiers fought around Verbősz. They were very brave, and also they continued fighting in a later stage in history. So roughly that is all I wanted to say about the Szekler Division. Those who try to criticize their activity usually argue with the following. The Romanians were in full attack, and they were also occupied with the Serbians, and their whole fight was not very severe. Yes, indeed, these battles were not so significant. Only a few instances could be mentioned, but in itself, I would say that there were a usual and constant minor clashes, which is all in all quite significant when we speak about the total activity of an army. On the other hand, the conditions among which these people had to fight was not very good. There are certain memoirs which say that, of course, it was not like the Hell of Doberdo, but still the situation was very bad. Physical situation was very bad. The supplies were very scarce. Here in this slide, you can see a photo of them. You can see that they had no proper uniforms. Their hygienic condition was also very bad. So practically, the reason why their story is so important that somehow we should place them on the balance of opposition. So the revision of Trianon preceded Trianon itself. There were different resistance movements taking place before Trianon, which at the same time perhaps had influenced or had an impact on the later decision of Trianon. Here I would like to speak about, for example, the plebiscite, the referendum in Sopron. So we can say that there were partial results in Hungary, for example, the referendum of Sopron, but still the military policy of the Soviet Republic of Hungary is perhaps easier to understand when we examine the history of the Szekler Division, which somehow proves that perhaps the whole story could have been different if there had been more military action on the part of Hungary. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much indeed for your presentation. I think it was a presentation which somehow gave us a broader perspective. But still, we always learned in school that the Szekler Division had a very important role in blocking the Romanian attack. But at the same time, we also had very negative, critical remarks about their role. And right now, we heard a presentation which tried to present both opinions. And I think getting rid of the myths is very important. And if we want to get rid of all these rigid myths, we have to work a lot, we historians. So thank you very much for this excellent presentation.